What would you think if I told you that the internet has failed to connect us? And rather than creating a global village, the World Wide Web has actually isolated us from each other. We all know that Facebook social algorithms keep us trapped in filter bubbles with people who are exactly like us, who reflect our backgrounds and beliefs. So it can also be surprising that studies show that we're growing increasingly xenophobic. We're tightening borders, and we're building walls, and not just in our policies, but in our own lives. I see this at play in my work. As a software engineer who's built communication platforms, it's been surprising and disheartening to learn how few people we actually communicate with, especially since so many of the great things that's happened to me in my life are the result of knowing the right person. So because I'm intentional about meeting new and different people, I started hosting dinner parties. And I had this one party where I invited about a dozen people to my Manhattan apartment. We were all sitting around a big table, enjoying dinner and each other's company. And I asked my friends for an app idea that might unite the world. So, being a software engineer and a bit maybe of an idealist, I'm often asking these kind of questions at dinner parties. So, fair warning, if you come to one of my parties, I might ask you for an app idea. And without missing a beat, my friend Mo said, "Man, I've got an idea. How about an app to connect people like us?" Now, Mo he's Palestinian American, and he brought with him his good friend Sarah, who's from Tel Aviv. They had met at yoga a few months back. And we're always joking about how they're like single-handedly bringing about world peace. I said, "Mo, by people like us, do you mean an app to connect Israelis and Palestinians?" And he said, "Yes, exactly, an app to connect people like us." And a light bulb went off. There's a theory in psychology called the contact hypothesis, which dates back to the 50s. And it's the simple idea that when members of different groups, even groups that historically don't get along, trust and empathy blossom while prejudice falls by the wayside. Now, a lot of people think of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as like the most intractable geopolitical conflict. But perhaps the solution isn't a political top-down one, but instead a grassroots bottom-up approach, as my friends have demonstrated. And many organizations have successfully used this theory in conflict zones, but none had yet used the ubiquity of smartphones to scale it. So I began work on the app. And I designed a solution that puts this theory into practice. Basically, users choose which side of a conflict they identify with, and if they choose A, we show them B, and vice versa. And then in the app, users swipe through profiles, and if two people like each other, we pair them in a one-on-one chat. And there's audio and video messaging, which of course helps to build the relationship. After a few weeks of development, I was ready to test it. I uploaded the beta to the App Store just to test it, and then unexpectedly, out of nowhere, users just started pouring in. First from New York, then the Middle East, then the whole world. Before we knew it, we had 10,000 highly active users. We were going viral. When I saw that the model worked in the Middle East, I wanted to expand our reach, and I started pairing groups from other conflicts. So North and South Ireland, and political groups in South America, and the two groups who I identify the most with, Republicans and Democrats, and this was leading up to the election. So the question that most people ask me is, isn't there a lot of fighting in the chats? And the answer is no. There have been 0 reported cases of fighting, arguing, trolling, or any other nastiness. In fact, even though we're pairing groups in conflict, they are swiping that they like each other 80% of the time. This shows me that we've found an audience that was looking for a solution. So I'd like to tell you a story of 2 of our users who sent us a story early on who were looking for a solution. It starts with a young man, his name's Rashad. He lives in Ramallah, Palestine, and a young woman, Juliana, who lives in Jerusalem. They meet on the app. They bonded over a mutual love of salsa dancing, which I think is kind of awesome. And they wanted to meet in person, but there is, of course, a wall that separates them. But their meeting happened to coincide with history. For the first time in several years, Israel began easing restrictions on the Palestinians for the holy month of Ramadan. So they could meet, but to do so, Rashad had to get up at 6 in the morning. He had to deal with huge crowds at the border, under the hot desert sun, in the summer, just to meet his friend for tea. But despite all the inconveniences, he still got up every day, and they hung out every day until the border was closed. Some people might say that, two people meeting for tea isn't a big deal, but I think that peace has to start somewhere. And now with a friend on the other side, not only are they unlikely to partake in violence against the other side, but I think they're a lot more likely to go out of their way to stop it. Their relationship serves as an example of how communication technology has untapped potential to solve global issues. If every American had at least one friend living in Syria or Afghanistan or Iraq, how might that change how we treat those countries? Would you be very likely to vote for a politician who's promising to bomb a city where your friend lives? There's no way, right? Let's dare to imagine a world where we're not building walls to protect our communities, but instead redefining our idea of community so that walls are unnecessary. We've built a World Wide Web. We could have a more peaceful and better world if we use it to build a global village. Thank you.